my gosh, it says live. Good morning, Mad PD world. We have no idea who's tuning in right now. We are just really excited. My name's Allison Fuisz, and I'm here with the amazing Jay Dubois. We will be honest with you right now. This is the first time we've done anything like this. So if you're going to go back and view this, you're going to have to bear with us on anything that's about to happen that may be a hiccup or a plot twist in life when errors do arise. We're here today to talk and discuss and learn from each other about amplifying student voice through technology. We do have a few guests that are going to be popping in along the way, but given it's 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, who knows what could be going on. Oh, I think we have Mark with us right now.
How are you?
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
We were just introducing ourselves quickly and saying what this is like and how this is our first experience doing something like this. And so realistically, we are the students amplifying our voices in some way right now and modeling it.
8 a.m.
I know, we are so appreciative.
So good. I'm Mark.
Well, I think what we're going to do, and we know that a few others are going to pop on in a few moments, Mark. Jay and I have prepared a few little things to say for over the next couple of minutes, just to get things started and then head towards the full discussion opportunity with you and whoever else joins us, just to share our backgrounds and understanding of student voice from an educator perspective. Yeah, Jay, what do you want to add to that?
Just sending off one more invite to a friend here. I just hear a little bit of feedback on someone's laptop there. So I think what we'll do as well, sorry, I'm trying to multitask here, is I guess me and Allison, the idea is that we do some talking for a little bit and a bit out of both of our comfort zones to a certain extent. And then the guests that are joining today, what we'll do is that after we kind of do our piece, we'll open it up to our guests and make sure everyone's mics are unmuted and it's an authentic conversation. So we're very appreciative of everyone joining us this morning. So thank you, Mark. This is a fun opportunity for Allison and myself as well. We've never met and we've just kind of connected through some colleagues. So it's just the cool idea of this PLN kind of this network happening. And so this is something new, something fresh to do on a beautiful Sunday morning. So thanks, everyone. And Lori McKee will be joining us shortly, but just a quick introduction for myself for friends that are out there watching. My name's Jay and I'm a primary junior teacher and been doing that for a long time. And something I've recently been passionate about is community-based learning, getting kids out of the classroom as much as possible, breaking down the idea of four walls of a classroom. And a big push for me has been providing like a real audience for kids. So if we're hoping for them to be using their voices, is someone listening and trying to make sure that someone's there to hear what they have to say. And that's kind of where my passion is. And I know when we get Lori on board too, she's at the younger end of things as well. And my friend Allison, she's my intermediate specialist up there in Ottawa. And perhaps she can tell a bit more about what her passions are.
So yeah, I am an intermediate teacher here, or educator as I like sometimes prefer to call it, here in Ottawa. And I've been at this level now for roughly 6 years. And one of the biggest things, just like Jay, is community-based learning, but it's also just about getting students to be aware of the choices they have to express themselves, to express their learning, and becoming really the co-learners, the co-leaders of the learning opportunities that are presented to them. I think it's incredibly important that we as educators don't see ourselves, and I've seen this again and again online and social media and in conversations, that we're not the source, we're not a resource of information, we're a source, we are a resource, not a source of information, sorry, mix that up, and that we are there to kind of guide their thinking. One of the things that I hear when I speak with, sorry, welcome Ruxin, our honorary dog, to this chat. One of the things that I hear a lot amongst my colleagues is we're not fostering an environment as for critical thinkers, but yet we still continue to provide worksheets and to spoon feed and just manipulate the situation sometimes, and even though we don't realize that we're doing that. So how are we fostering student growth and mindset opportunity for choice if that's what we're doing. I'm not sure if this is a good time really right now, Jay, but I think it might be just to show the second slide picture, or the slide number 4. It's a bit ahead, but I can't help but consistently want to go back. And Mark, I hope that you can see this. This is Jay took the lead role of screen casting.
Yeah.
And it's so slide number 4. Yeah. So this is something that I continually go back to because it outlines that the first level, what school climate can look like in student voice. And I believe that what I'm trying to foster within my classroom is going for number 1, which speaks to manipulation, and going through the scaffolding opportunities myself to get myself to number 8, so that students are really involved with the decisions that we are making, that we are creating together, because it's about their learning. So I am super passionate about this. I could rant for a long time, but in the back of my head consistently I have, okay, well, where's the student voice in this? And why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing? It's not for me. It should never be about me. It should be about students. And that's why I'm really excited to share this opportunity of understanding that PJs can use technology to get them ready to be a more independent, critical thinker, analyzer in the intermediate, high school, professional opportunity. So, yeah.
Thanks, Allison. And Mark, neither of us have met you in person. Just really curious, what's your role like, and where are you sitting right now?
I am, so I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am an assistant professor of education at Arcadia University. And I study student voice, organizational change, distributive leadership. Prior to that, this current position, I was a founding faculty member of a history and civic themed high school in Philadelphia called Constitution High School. And there, students studied 8 years of history in 4 years, deeply studied civics. And then we built a youth adult leadership governance structure that was modeled after the federal government. So there was a House of Students, Faculty Senate, and an executive branch with one president, and so student body president, vice president, and cabinet, had the judicial branch, and so forth. Anyway, so that system, and if you want to learn more about it, we published a free manual on it and case studies about it on the National Constitution Center's website, and the model is called We the School. And anyway, so when I went to get a doctorate at Temple University, I did an ethnography of that model, and I was able to uncover that youth adults working together over school problems ended up triggering organizational change that really helped to improve the school. Students saw the difference between change in school practices versus improving school practices, which was a really important distinction for young people and for the adults they were working with. So now, now I'm studying youth adult leadership and discipline. Hopefully my next work will be looking at student voice and teacher evaluations and so forth. So it's really inspiring to hear that you guys are engaged in this, and specifically the technology piece, because I think this is one of the easiest ways to move from teacher-centered pedagogical practices to student-centered pedagogical practices. I mean, it's been successful. I hear Alice's frustration that teachers are saying that they value young people and they're thinking critical thinking, but then they put worksheets in front of them. And I think part of that is that they don't know many other models of teaching. And I think technology makes it, with a little level of training, they actually can shift their practices. I still think it takes a lot of training and work, but I think it's very feasible. So I was inspired by this topic.
All right. No, hey, that's kind of neat to know at the other end of the spectrum, especially for my world in primary junior, where that conversation begins. And that throws really well, I think, if we officially get started, the whole idea about today is it's a MAD PD, stands for Make a Difference PD. And if there's one thing you can do in your classroom, would our tip be? And I think I speak for Allison as well when I say put technology in kids' hands, regardless of age, to help kind of break down those barriers and start to give them options of voice and choice. So they are a member of a classroom community, not just a student with a teacher at the front. So I think if we kind of jump into our slide deck, does it make sense with that now, Allison?
100%.
And I know my friend Lori is trying to connect in, and I'll just give a quick bio for her, so when her face pops up, everyone knows who she is. And she's a primary teacher as well in Woodstock. We're down in the Thames Valley School Board, but she's a primary teacher by day, but by night she's finishing up her PhD in curriculum, and her focus is supporting teachers in designing pedagogies that include digital technologies as well. And I know she's collecting a lot of data for her research in grade 1 classrooms and things like that. So we've been talking quite a bit. I'm just going to pop up our slideshow again there, Allison.
Yeah, of course. Well, and we're going to start, we've touched upon it already for anyone tuning in or for anyone who looks at this down the road, that how we define student voice. We definitely have sort of looked at it, and I think, Jay, do we want to just kind of pop right into that right now then? I should actually give, sorry, could you go back up to the first slide just really quickly? Apologies. I would feel amiss if I did not recognize that the various languages that are on that first piece are actually use of technology and student voice. It's a colleague of mine who works at Featherston Public School here in the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, and his class is very diverse, culturally rich, and I reached out to them to, you know, translate student voice, les voix des élèves, in a variety of languages, and within 24 hours on a Google Doc. So use of technology, even though it's, you know, kind of a glorified typewriter at that point, but it was still a shareable opportunity for them to use their voice to be included in some way in the idea of student voice. So grateful for them and doing that for me and for anybody else looking at this. But yeah, I guess it's slide number 5.
That's great. All right.
Yeah. You know, okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark, feel free.
I just think technologically, I think you guys are trying to show the slide, but when every time you talk, it switches to you, I think. And so I'm not able to see the slide.
Oh, so Jay would have to.
You would have, if you're talking, you would have to, I think, show the slide. And I think that's what's happening, just so you know.
Okay, no, that makes complete sense.
So that works. So maybe Allison, I can, I'm assuming then that you guys can see the slide now when I'm talking. Is that true?
Yep.
Okay, so we're doing some learning today. So I guess the way this can work, Allison, is that I can kind of put up the slide for a little bit and talk about my piece, and then when it throws back to you, you'll kind of have to you go without screen sharing. We can make this work.
Yes.
Taking a look at the student voices slide right there, I also put together a couple of points in terms of just acknowledging strengths and teachers as advocates as well, because the whole idea is that eventually we want these students becoming advocates for themselves. And kind of when does that modeling start? Tuning in, listening to students and creating space for choices. And we'll talk a little bit later too about providing choice in a classroom. Really, it doesn't matter if you're primary, junior, or intermediate. Choice is key to getting that voice amplified from a young age, and them understanding that their voice is valued. Getting egos out of the picture. I'm glad Allison added that point there, because it is about developing a community where everyone's voice is valid and it's authentically being listened to, and training the kids as to what that looks like, because it is a new experience for many of them. Allison, anything you'd like to add to how we kind of define student voice?
There are so many different ways, but I know we discussed this in the sense that it's recognizing their values, their opinions, their beliefs, perspectives, allowing them to be able to speak and us to listen, to acknowledging them as a person, and to include them in that process of learning, to include them in that process of curiosity, which is exactly what we as adults would like to have too, to be acknowledged and respected for what we can bring forth. And that's, to me, when we sit down with a student and truly listen to them without interrupting their learning, their flow, their fluidity, like Vygotsky wants us to be able to create in his research that he did, where the flow of learning is concerned, student voice is truly embracing these students each and every time we speak with them into the entire process. When I walk into my classroom, our classroom, more importantly, I love that one of my students, there's no desk in room 9 where we celebrate learning on a daily basis, but there is this one chair that I was slightly attached to. It's a rolly chair. It squeaks like crazy, but I said, this is the one thing that Madame has quote unquote control over. And one of my amazing students said, well, Madame, you said this is our classroom, so really you should have no control over this chair, whether it squeaks or not. This is something that we should all use. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's right. They know that that there are certain adult limitations to which I cannot permit them to do certain things, or we have to critically discuss that because it's for their safety or for whatever purposes. But yay, Lori's in.
Hey.
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
Good morning, Lori.
Good morning.
But
Good morning.
it's student voice is understanding what, and going back to what Mark was saying, is understanding the pedagogical approaches, not the best pedagogical approaches because every student's going to learn in a different way, but having a back pocket on our own to support student voice of their passions, their interests, their backgrounds, who they are. It's about letting kids recognize who they are and how they can put that into whatever's being approached in class.
And Allison, it's really so glad Lori could join in. Thanks, Lori, for popping in. And she can help me talk about a little bit about what that looks like when kids are 6 and when kids are 7 and 8. And in my classroom this year, I have 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and it's a bit of process making them understand what voice is, and they have choice, and why is that something that's cool and something that's important, and how are they having a say in what they're doing on any given day. Hopefully thinking about what the long game is here. So when Allison and I first talked about this, we're thinking really the idea of education is a continuum, but the idea of releasing the idea of a student voice is a continuum as well. So what does that look like in a highly scaffolded early years room? And when they get to Allison's classroom in grade 8, where they're ready to take on the world and they're ready to jump into high school and then beyond, do these kids have that sense where you know, like their voice is being honored in that classroom? So maybe, Allison, we can bring up the technology piece, and just kind of, we're hoping to share, because we do see tech as being the big key to opening up doors for kids in this sense, and getting their voice beyond the 4 walls of your classroom. We put together just a bit of a list of some of the apps I use and some of the platforms I give students for choice in a grade 3, grade 4 classroom. And then Allison's compared and kind of said, in a grade 8 room, here's what we can then, here's how we're extending that, and here are some of the technology pieces we're using to, you know, more amplify that continuum as it goes. So I'll bring up that slide now. And now that I understand, thanks, Mark, that it only shows when I'm talking, I guess I'll talk first, Allison, and then I'll throw it back to you, and you can speak to what things look like at the intermediate end of things.
Sounds perfect. Do you know what I'm going to do, Jay? Too, I'm going to tweet out the because we're on technology. I'm going to excuse me, tweet out the link to the slide deck, because it's definitely a shareable piece. And then if anyone who is listening out there, if you Allison @Allison_Fuisz. If you want to click on that link, you can have access right away to know what we're talking about. Growth opportunity for us all.
Perfect. Great. So we kind of just named it we named it a continuum. So I guess that's a thing now, a technology learning continuum, primary, intermediate, and beyond. And Mark can hopefully speak later a bit to the beyond piece. So in the PJ world, I kind of, our days are highly chunked into subject areas, of course, and I'm thinking about the technology I use regularly in a reading or writing capacity when we're doing language activities. Obviously, those activities are highly integrated with our subject areas, but some of the ways we can get kids to know that we value what they have to say is making sure that their work is showing up on the smartboard or the projector via the Apple TV, so whatever's on their iPads being shown, and they know that every other pair of eyes in the classroom is looking at their thinking, and it's part of the conversation. Something as simple as creating a Google form about a text to answer questions where kids are doing a reading piece, they're all logging into a form, then we can bring up all the responses, and you know, the written answers become touch points as we have class discussions, and it pulls them in. Using iPads to create what's called like a book snap, where they might take a screenshot or a picture of a page where they have a reading focus for that day, and they pop that into maybe a Google Drawing or on an iPad, a pic collage, and can put their image, add their text, add their quotes, add their piece, and those drawings can be put together into a slideshow. A pic collage can be shown on a smartboard just for quick conversations, or something that's more specific over time, where kids are developing almost like a portfolio of their thinking, and knowing that those portfolios will be shared with peers, and like with home and other audiences. A little bit, which is sort of like making mind maps with your fingers on an app. And what's cool about that, especially with the young kids, the ability to add images and take photographs and have that, you know, alongside their typing, and well, their voice typing too, which is pretty cool. So they have these documents, which is just basically thought bubbles and thinking, and it's messy, but it's quick and it's visual, and it's again something that's easy to pop into a slideshow, pop into a blog that they have to show their thinking for the day, something that can be shared with students from other classrooms in the building or beyond. We like to introduce the idea of students not necessarily being held back with pencil and paper as well. Or when I say that, I mean writing. So not all kids are really excited about writing, and there's still a lot of reluctancy in the younger years, but many of those students are amazing when it comes to oral language. So if we can take the writing out of the piece sometimes and do a video overdub of some sort, where they're able to orally capture their thinking, that pulls a lot of kids out of their shells. And also, when they're sharing a video of what they've talked about, the pressure is much more different than them actually standing up or putting up their hand, where it feels like they're putting themselves out there with everyone looking at them. Many of those students are much more comfortable watching themselves on something they've pre-recorded, because they could have hit the delete button, gone back, fixed it, and maybe just right before they hit submit and know that their audience is ready to see it. We definitely introduce them to the idea of blogging, where we write because we want to write, we write because we're passionate about something, we want to develop a little portfolio of our thinking over time. So certainly in a younger room, we're giving a lot of scaffolding as to what today's entry might be about, or perhaps we're saying, you know, this time is going to be focused on your science thinking, we're really proud of what you've been doing, here's some ideas, here's some sentence starters. But that's just enough of a push where they realize that they're developing their own little autobiography of their learning in a sense. Yeah, so in any kind of platform that we use, where kids can talk, kids can add images, and make things look something like what their parents might be using, or something might see on YouTube, adds engagement, but at the same time, they don't understand that they're developing this tool belt of some really cool strategies. So in the intermediate end of things,
so one of the things that I'm going to be conscious of the time here, because we have two amazing individuals with us here that have a lot to share. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. That in the slide deck which is slide number 7, where we have this sort of continuum, I really struggled personally to realize that there's such an interdisciplinary opportunity with technology where student voice is concerned. And I just want to state right away that I know there's maybe listeners out there, or those who may view this potentially afterwards, saying that I don't have a lot of technology in my classroom to be able to afford these opportunities that you're outlining here in this document or in this conversation. But there are more technological programs and apps that can be used just by an iPad or a desktop than we could ever imagine. So I think that we're no longer able to use that as an, I guess I hesitate to say this, but as an excuse. But within the 7-8 intermediate level, the idea of taking those pictures and taking that writing that you're doing at the PJ and adding it to a variety of apps and robotics. I'm just going to jump through all of them, Jane. You can go back, but everything from Minecraft to Kahoot to Google Docs to Lego robotics to using a sketch app called Medibang. These are all choices that the intermediate learner can use to share their learning in a way that is meaningful to them. There was, not that long ago, I was part of a conference where we were working with students who had graduated but weren't sure whether they wanted to take the college route or the university. So this is where, Mark, that we can get back to you on this in a bit, that along the way they noted that not a lot of people focused on their strengths and the opportunity of how they were sharing their learning. So everything that we do in the intermediate level, at least within Room 9 learning opportunities, is like, here are the variety of choices that you have. What of these pieces of technology, which of these pieces of technology that we have presented, or apps or programs, can best showcase your strengths and add to your learning and make you feel valued for your learning and continued curiosity to go further with that learning, because perhaps that reading log is not something that really is of interest to you. But if I said, well, is a sketch note or is using iMovie for a bande-annonce, a movie trailer, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, could that help you better show your learning of the book? We're moving from what Jay is doing with that value of a portfolio and of the picture collage and just simply manipulating tech in a certain way, to continuing to use technology like their folks or guardians made you, or the professionals, and adding that professional piece into it, saying, well, this could put you in this profession down the road, this choice board. Much of what you see on the document on slide 7, those are the choices afforded to students. And if they have something to add to it, then by all means. It's about, in the intermediate learner, knowing which programs, which apps are applicable to certain subjects and how those subjects can be combined, because really it's not a linear, it's not a words. Je parle en français de temps en temps aussi. It's not we're not putting them in boxes. There we go. We want to find a way to look at language by this level, look at math, look at science, and how can we integrate these all together so that it's not seen as a one track. Graphic designers are not one track thinkers. They're using a bunch of these different subjects that we're showcasing in the elementary years and junior intermediate. And how can we blend them all? So that's the goal at the intermediate level.
And just again, thanks, Allison, for that. And looking at time, I'm going to quickly bring up my slide deck really quickly here. And I was having this chat with Lori not too long ago about kind of getting technology in the hands of kids. And Allison, I'm glad you brought up to the whole idea of access to technology as a barrier. That's very real, but I think it's something where we need to put our energy into that to make that happen. It's just to the benefit of our kids, and certainly with the idea of e-portfolios and those some friends out there in the primary junior world may be using things like Seesaw, where it is very kid friendly, and when you get kids together as well, and we're teaching them these new platforms at younger ages, it's amazing how they become experts with each other so quickly, and within a matter of minutes of trying something new, you have 5 experts in the room putting their hand, offering to help other friends, and before you know it, you have everyone in your classroom becoming very savvy in a sense with the technology piece. And these kids truly are very much digital natives in the sense that they pick things up and they're risk takers, and they want to figure it out, and they're very engaged to do so. And Allison's also right, like the number of options out there, we can't even really get into. I guess the idea in general is just to think that when we look at the continuum of young kids to older kids, and what we can do in our classrooms is just provide exposure, develop tools that kids have, because learning one tool helps them master the use of other tools. So regardless of what tool is being given as a choice or given as an option, they're going to be pretty confident trying to use that and know that, hey, whatever I'm doing here can easily be sent there. And that's something that can't be done with a worksheet, with a piece of paper as easily. And friends in my classroom this year, right, like they know that things that they're doing are being seen by different members of the community. And it's when we're out and about, it's amazing how that network kind of grows, and you know, people come towards you saying, oh, I heard this, we saw that, and bringing that back to the students saying, what you're doing is larger than this room, right? And then they get up to Allison's world, where those kids hopefully are getting to the point where they feel like they can change the world, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So
that kind of
keep getting.
no, I'm going to say that's the last piece of the self-actualization. Recognizing having students recognize, I'm going to go back to something Trudeau has stated over and over again, our lovely Prime Minister, that our students are not the change makers of tomorrow or the leaders of tomorrow. They are the change makers and leaders of today. And when we think about this technology and what Jay is saying of sharing it with experts, sharing it with people in the world that need to hear it, they see the value in what they're doing, and it's not just busy work. And knowing that students have such this affinity towards technology and become the experts and become the lead learners, I don't know what I would do without some of my intermediate students in supporting me in this technology that we're bringing in, because I know that I don't even necessarily have that time to invest in learning how a certain app or program works. But if they do, they teach me, they teach others. How amazing does that feel? It's kind of like what we're doing right now. We took a risk. We're not necessarily experts per se, but that's the same sort of kind of, stomach butterfly positive sensation that we can create for students, so that they're not afraid to go into those interviews down the road, because they have this leadership, this self-actualization opportunity within them, this confidence building, because of these opportunities that they're helping to create for themselves. And we're just orchestrating it for them. We're just the conductors and being like, all right, let's go. Yeah. Sorry, Jay, I jumped ahead, but I thought that was the perfect opportunity to get to our final point. And then you add on your piece.
No worries. I can't believe it's 8:32 already, so I think that's probably some good timing to. I'm just going to post the slide that we put together that had just a couple of questions that we can have our experts pipe in and perhaps just have a bit of a conversation. So we're over time, but we can keep hanging out as long as we want. So let me just screen share something here. And this is new for me, by the way. This whole sharing my screen thing is kind of blowing my mind in some ways. Questions to ponder here. So I'm just going to go through all four, and then I'll kind of stop sharing my screen again. We can kind of just have a conversation. So I guess kind of, again, looking at the idea of this being a continuum, can a teacher in grade 1 or 2 provide choice as a way to empower students to get the ball rolling? And it might not even be the use of technology specifically with that age group, but what does the idea of providing choice in a classroom look like? And what does that eventually lead to? And how are those choices offered in a primary room different than choices that can be offered in an intermediate room, in a high school, certainly university, and those more grown-up learners? Allison touched briefly on tech integration. How does that support future career choices of our students? And we live in a world now where kids they're creating their own content, and they're doing it quite confidently and easily with tools that are readily available. So how are we supporting kids for jobs where we don't know what those jobs are yet, but are we giving them the confidence, the voice, and the technological know-how to kind of go in the direction that they're passionate about? In talking about the learner's zone of development, so when we talk about developing kids, I can't just throw a big problem at my friends in grade 4 and assume that they're able to step back from themselves, be very self-reflective, make a lot of choices, and have kind of a big wide open task. That just doesn't work for kids that are 9. It's a lot of scaffolding, a lot of steps, a lot of sentence starters, a lot of question frames, and a lot of one-on-one time to make that work. So what does that look like as kids age, and how much independence can we start to release to students? And how does that model change from that scaffolding model with a teacher to like that student release, where eventually kids are empowered to take on their own learning? So I'm just going to kind of go back to, I'll stop sharing the screen here, and maybe we can talk first about the one about involving primary students. Like how do we start honoring voice in a grade 1 classroom? What does that look like? Maybe Lori, you might be able to speak to some of the things you've seen in that realm.
Okay, so can you hear me? Is it coming through okay? Okay.
You're coming through.
All right. I don't know. I think primary is a different world in a lot of ways. And so when we're thinking about kids in grade 1, grade 2, you know, some of these kids are 5 years old. And I think that the first thing that we need to think about is that not all of these kids have a common experience with technology. So they might be able to use technology at home, but the applications that they're using are different, the types of technology that they're using. So in order to allow them to express their voice, we need to be speaking a common language. And so part of that is the practice with the different applications. And I think that at all levels, but particularly with the young children, they need time to play, to see what's out there, because otherwise it ends up being, this is what I want you to do with this app, rather than let's have you express yourself with this app and hopefully head to a particular end. So I think that that also speaks to, like, regardless of the level, the positioning of the teacher, right? So with little kids, with big kids, with adults, the positioning of the teacher is different. We're not transmitting the information. We are positioning the technology to enhance. So I don't know if that makes sense to people. Does that help?
Thanks,
I
Lori.
could go on and on and on. I try to be concise.
Well, no, I appreciate that, because I think I work in a school where we're a K-4 school, so really we're a primary plus school. We have 350 kids under the age of 10. And when we look at student voice opportunities, that's just so very different than what's happening at the school across the street, where they have 5 through 8. It doesn't look the same, but I think to those steps, that teaching piece, developing that digital tool belt, that comfort level, and then showing, hey, here's how we can share here. Here's my thing up on the screen. To a kid who's 6 years old, that's huge. That's huge. And it seems like that's something we take for granted in the older grades, but that has to be happening. We have to give those opportunities so that when it's time for grade 3, where kids are a bit more independent and they come to grade 4, they're ready to rock and roll, right? It's those baby steps all along the way, and in the back of our minds as teachers, just kind of thinking, what should kids in grade 8 be able to do? How do we help those teachers get those kids there? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. Right?
Well, I think too, like when you're thinking about a continuum, when you start kids with these different ways of thinking and doing with technology, what is possible along the continuum changes. So if I have a child in grade 1, you know, what we know about young children, like from a theoretical base, is that young children are much more flexible. We have been trained to look at language, printed language, as extremely important, and it is important, but we're constrained. These are the rules. This is how I have learned. But when you open up possibilities for children in the early years and in grade 1, as they progress, like, who knows really what they're going to be able to do when they have that experience and when they're allowed to build on that experience.
No, I completely agree. And Allison, maybe we can kind of open it up to the beyond, right? Like, do you see, is there such thing as a student who comes in who's feeling kind of confident versus students that don't? And I just wonder what their different classroom experiences are along the way. And then just kind of speaking to Mark, where you see as well, like kids in the high school and university level, like how can we start supporting that when kids are 6 and 7 years old?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm like really inspired by this idea of scaffolding. You know, I'm just trying to think of like where that is in the literature of student voice, and wondering if that's an explicit concept, because a lot of the times in which I've engaged with working with schools that are moving or trying to move to student voices, that's always the question that comes up, is like, how can we scaffold students? So I think there's something really there that's worth exploring. But I think if we widen our gaze of, yes, technology is a tool and helps students to share and have all these like really wonderful things that you're speaking about, but then to move beyond, to make that a more informative experience in the classroom as a whole. First, I think about when we we talk about technology and giving students agency. Do they have agency over instruction? Do they have agency over curriculum? Do they have agency over assessment? Like which areas? So I think that helps to delineate a little bit more to help teachers think about like where are the spaces in which we're giving students freedom to build and co-construct with us. The second piece then is what kind of feedback loops are we creating in our classroom? What kind of dialogues are we creating in our classroom about the classroom, about our experience? Not only engaging the work, but reflecting about the work, because I think you all are very right that it's hard to move people to this direction because it's both strategies and competencies, but it's also philosophical and disposition oriented. So I think there's something really important there in terms of not only scaffolding students, but scaffolding the teacher and scaffolding the classroom as a whole. So that really sort of resonates with me. One thing with the lower levels, I wanted to add because I was hearing it, and I haven't done a ton of study of the younger areas in terms of like grades 1 and 2, but I have my students read Vivian Paley. I teach in the teaching preparation program. It's one of the programs I teach in, and so I'm teaching elementary and secondary students. And one of the first classes that they take, we try to shift their dispositions a bit and saying, because a lot of them come in thinking, we love kids, but I'm going to be standing in front of the classroom. Like that's their images of what teaching is. So I begin to sort of disabuse them of those notions by doing some professional learning communities in the classroom, but also helping them to read material in which there have been really great educators doing some really awesome work at the lower levels. And Vivian Paley is just one example where she really emphasizes and illustrates what does it mean to listen to children and what does that process look like and how does that shift her practices. And then I think she wrote a book called Play, in which she helps young people negotiate what does it mean to play with others and establish boundaries when you say, I don't want to play with you, or I do want to play with you. When should we be able to do that? And when should we say, no, we really should be more inclusive at this moment? So, and so helping students even at the pre-K 1, 2, 3, 4 early elementary grade, primary levels to negotiate classroom rules and policies and practices, I think is part of the context of this technological instructional piece that you all are speaking about today. And so when you move to the middle and the high school settings, I don't think that necessarily changes. I think one, you need to do the work of engaging young people in classrooms, because if you do that, that will engage them outside of the classrooms. In fact, a study that I did, which I published in my book, Student Voice in School Governance, it looked at the school wasn't able to sustain student voice across the school in terms of governing because they didn't have enough of it in the classrooms showing students that it meant something, right? And so the school shifted its practices and had a class instructional unit experience where students were sort of building solutions to problems in the school, but in the civic classroom, and then taking that work to the school governance level, and that re-engaged and spread the values, beliefs, principles, and behaviors of student voice across school, as well as in those classrooms that were doing it. So.
Well, and I think, Mark, everything you just said and what's going on, the one thing that resonates with me so greatly that is if we don't start, a couple of things that struck to me, if we don't start providing the positioning that Lori talks about, have position technology, but also to that agency of what students actually can support in the younger years, by the time they come to me as an intermediate learner, it's like we're starting fresh again. Mm-hmm. There are still so many students, and I mean, I know that this is still, I can't say that it's new to our system of learning. Mm-hmm. The idea of student voice is only now, I truly believe, really starting to be embraced or used properly. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but that understanding of the co-learning opportunity. So now you throw technology into this, there's another learning curve for our colleagues. Yeah. But if we don't start embracing this and having students, that feedback loop that you talked about, Mark, that's one thing that I know that I personally need to grow with, getting as really fostering feedback from students about what we're doing, how we're doing it, maybe subtly that it is happening. But if the primary years are not, if our grade 1, 2, 3 kindergartners, if these things are not being showcased to them, if they are not being listened to, if we're just hearing them and not truly listening to them, if we're not allowing them for certain choice or play opportunities, when they come to us, they are still very structured in what they want learning. Now, I'm by no means, I know I have students that need that structure. That is their learning needs, but they also know at that point that that's what they need. And I can respect that. I love that about my students right now, is that they're finally, each one of them, at a place where they know what they need to be better learners. And sometimes they don't. So that's where our conversations come in, and getting them to be more agents of their learning. But that has to start at the younger years, those choices, those opportunities, those, I've just spent a week and a half messing around with Minecraft with my class. There has been no huge expectation attached to Minecraft Edu for my students, except play, collaborate, communicate, discuss, think about how this can be attached to learning in our classroom. What can we use this for? Yes, I have a vision in mind that they know, but they need this play opportunity and to support each other. And there are so many little experts that I had no idea, and so now they're advocating for each other. But for some of these kids, they didn't come into grade 7 like this. Some of them didn't come into grade 8 like this. So they've had to really be fostered to get to where they are. But if the PJ kids, educators with their students can do this earlier, imagine the possibilities at the intermediate, high school, college, university level. Those jobs that aren't yet created will be created by these people because they just know. They have visions and dreams, and they want to put them into reality. The impossible becomes the impossible.
You know, Allison, I think one of the shifts that you're speaking about, and I find this to be one of the areas that makes this hard to do, is that, I mean, you're really talking about what's the purpose of school and what's the purpose of a classroom. And a lot of educators, both educational leaders and people that have been in the classrooms and training to be in the classrooms, they tend to not really understand what their educational philosophies are, or whether they wrote it off in like the ED 110 class, right? And then it sort of got lost in the pickle of the work. But you're really speaking about progressivism and existentialism. So students get to sort of build and create problems and solve these problems and ask questions about truth. But we're talking about a system in the a contextual educational system right now that has really co-opted market reform and essentialism. Essential is like, these are the essential topics that need to be learned, the top-down approach. And so this, so many view what you're speaking about as a conflict with the current curricular approaches that public schools and in general you have to feel and do. And where I think the mistake is thinking that they're either ors. So that piece about how students are speaking about what they need and what they want, and then you speaking about helping to negotiate and have conversations about that. I truly believe that is an essential part of this, because there are pieces of curriculum, there are things that are necessary for most students to know, and finding a way to negotiate those boundaries in the classroom, I think is part of the work. And that's why I like when all of you originally were talking about scaffolding, because I think it's not just scaffolding students, it's scaffolding educators and what we're scaffolding in general. And in this respect, I think it's trying to find a balance between essentialism and progressive and existential practices in classrooms.
I love research talk sometimes so much. Sorry, I had to mention that.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's amazing when you can do someone in a classroom and then talk to a researcher who can make it sound super impressive with vocabulary that's new to me. So we're always definitely learners. And just to kind of like to piggyback on what you're saying, Mark, what's the best part about being a teacher is that little community that we have, right? Like there's so much autonomy we have in our rooms and how we want things to roll out. And every time, at least in my experience, when I've said, hey, can I give this a try? Or can I use this tech to do this? Or can I reach out and do an event here? The answer is usually, well, it's for the benefit of kids. Of course you can, go for it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunity to be trying lots of amazing things out there. And what's really cool is that as long as we know what works for our kids and the idea of scaffolding as well, we know how far we can push and we know how far or we know when to stop, and that conversation is different every year with a cohort of kids that you have. So I think teachers are experts at hopefully trying to reach those kids in a way that's most effective for them. Just hoping that the teachers out there trying things that are new, hopefully other teachers are knocking on doors and saying, hey, what are you doing? Can I try that too? And using those students and say, hey, well, let my students show you what they're doing. Like that peer-to-peer piece, and it breaks down a lot of barriers that way as well, and doesn't seem so scary and new. That's something that's I think really successful. And in terms, one last thing I'd probably speak about in the last few minutes that we have here is that idea where we are giving students agency, like we have that opportunity in. I'm doing a little ministry project next year where we're looking at even the use of something like a single point rubric. And that sounds so silly to be providing agency to kids, but the way I use a rubric is they assess themselves first, and regardless of what they're doing, they have to write down what their next step is, what their goal is, regardless of where they think they are living on the rubric. And then I get it. So like they're part of the assessment conversation, and they should be, right? That idea, like at the end of the day, yeah, it's me coming up with a big level that goes on a report card, but from the day to day, like we're not worried about levels, we're worried about goal setting, and those kids knowing that next time if I want to use this app to do this instead of what Mr. D showed today, I'm gonna say, go for it. Like show me the best way you can. That's truly when I know you're empowered. You say, hey, Mr. D, I had a student say he wanted to show his writing on Scratch, which is a coding program. And at first I scratched my head and said, why would you do that? And I said, give them choice. And then he said, I'm done, come and see. And he hits play, and like speech bubbles pop up, and these characters are talking. And I was just kind of like, boom, like that was such a huge moment. And I almost said no. But as long as you can kind of give trust and say, are you able to show me what I need to see? You know what those expectations are. Okay, go take a risk, but you know you have these are the parameters. Let kids just do that play piece, Lori, right? And let kids give it a try. And maybe that's not their big end of unit culminating assessment piece, but it's part of the way that they get there, and it gives them the sense that they have choice, and it gives them the sense that the teachers listen to them and sees them as an expert in a way, and it just builds a trust level, and that's such a huge thing in a classroom.
Well, and just to add to that, that's where the ego in us has to be let go. We truly have to be okay with ourselves to allow these risks to happen for the sake of students. And it's that idea of the single rubric and that co-created success criteria. In the intermediate level, we open up the curriculum and we state, here's what I am supposed to make sure that you know, relatively speaking, by the end of this year. How are we going to get there? What needs to be done, and how can we pull things out? How can we listen to each other, and what technological opportunities are going to get you there, or what can help foster this understanding of these expectations? And I truly believe for student voice and technology to be successful at any level, and selfishly at the intermediate, I want to see more students having educators who say, yep, let's do this, or let's learn together on this, so that by the time they come to me, I hesitate to say this, but I've heard rumors that some people think that when we give students so much choice that we're being lazy. And I would argue it's the opposite. The more I provide choice for students, the more work it is on me, because I have to constantly be on top of what they're doing and asking them pivotal questions to make sure they're on track, to make sure they're understanding, to make sure that they're leveraging the technology appropriately. So we're getting them to think critically, and we're making ourselves think critically in the situation too.
No, that's great. I can't believe I'm looking at the clock on the bottom of my computer screen here, and it's 8:54. So I guess we kind of have to get to the wrap-up point, and the whole idea about today was just sharing one thing, and this is bigger than one thing for sure. But certainly keep Allison and I in your conversations if you're talking about student voice and use of technology, because it's certainly something that we're passionate about. It looks different in our rooms because we're in different places in the continuum, but it's the same conversation in a lot of ways, right? I
have a thought. We have 5 minutes left, but what if each of us had one piece of advice to ourselves or to our colleagues, what would that be where student voice and tech is concerned, or just student voice in general? It's really hard to do this on the spot. I don't think I can, but I'm going to try. That's what this world is about. Hashtag what if. So maybe if we each ended off with one little piece of advice for ourselves and others where this kind of idea is concerned. What are your thoughts, Jay?
Sounds good. Hey, I'll put myself out there first, and if I had advice for colleagues, like I feel comfortable in my room with what we're doing, I would love to see this energy in different ways and be able to open up this world to other teachers. So I would just say, ask to borrow the kids, right? Ask to borrow my experts, and I'm happy to rent them out and bring tech with them and show, right? So learn, promote the student teaching and show what's out there, because they're pretty jazzed about it.
Mm-hmm. Did you want me to go next?
Go for it.
Okay, so I was thinking that what would be really supportive is thinking about keeping the learning at the center, keeping the child at the center, and then having the technology not as the focus, but calling that technology in service to the goal of the learning. So sometimes I think that we get distracted. Oh yeah, like there's this huge thing with Scratch right now and coding, right? So I got to learn that because it's really cool. But why is it cool, right? So think about, this is the learning that I want my children to experience, my students to experience, and then call that technology into serve that goal.
Thanks, Lori.
That's great.
There's a theory about that, actually, if we want to talk about theory, but sorry.
No, yeah. What's the theory?
It's called placed resources theory.
Placed resources theory.
Placed resources, yeah.
Wow.
It's not my theory. I didn't make it up.
It sounds interesting. So my advice would be to lean in. So teachers should find a colleague or two, form a professional learning community, and make it their goal to not only read something about student voice so they understand a little bit about it, but to build a unit of study with their students. Everything from the curricular goals to the instructional strategies to the assessment and those processes, and then do it with those students, and then reflect on what they did, what worked, what didn't work, and then go back to the professional learning community and talk about it. I think it's essential. Like Jay and Allison, you guys are awesome. Hopefully you're not working in isolation in your schools, because the more teachers that do this in each space, the more that you guys will learn, and the more that you build the capacity of the school to be able to do this work. So I think it starts with great innovators like yourselves, but it can't stop there. So I appreciate that you're doing a professional development like this today, because I think you're trying to spread the ideas and the work. But I also think that you can do this in your own buildings if you're not already doing it already. To be leaders in your buildings.
And I will just add quickly as we approach, to add on to, I wish I could just say ditto to everything you all said. I am going to say ditto to everything that was just outlined. Lots of new research that I want to do, thanks to all of you. The research junkie continues. But I think to go along with Mark is that we as educators need to take risks ourselves, and we need to put ourselves out there, because if we don't put ourselves out there, as painful as we sometimes think it is, because of what Lori mentioned earlier about, this certain way that we've had our learning has been brought to us, if we don't put ourselves out there, our students may not either. We can't assume that whatever opportunities we provide them will be taken if we don't show the risks that we wish to take in our learning and our curiosity for learning. I have a little symbol on my Google that says when something goes wrong in life, just yell plot twist. And it's kind of a motto that I live by, because I can't focus personally in my learning all the errors. I need to learn from them. Failure is a learning opportunity, and technology, student voice is what can be part of that. That it's not about failure, it's about this growth opportunity for our students and for ourselves. So take risks.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. And thanks so much to Mark and for Lori joining us this morning and helping Allison and myself take a risk today. This was a lot of fun. I'm sure we could talk forever, but it's a Sunday morning, so go and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks, everyone. And I guess we're tuning out for now. Take care.
Thank you, Lori.
Bye.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jay. Thanks, Derek and Peter, for making this happen too for Mad PD. I think that
Absolutely.
the world's gonna see a shift in education, and it starts with everybody. So
Absolutely. Let's stay in touch. Awesome to meet everybody.
likewise, let's keep in touch. Au revoir, mes amis.
Goodbye.
Bye, guys.